This is the image of modern-day China. High-tech cities filled with towering skyscrapers, bright lights, and clean, efficient mass transit. Yet for years, the world's second-largest economy has claimed the status of a developing nation at the World Trade Organization. This contradiction has been the focus of debate among WTO member states, putting global trade in gridlock for years. But Beijing recently announced a historic shift.
中方宣布，在世贸组织当前和未来谈判中，不寻求新的特殊和差别待遇。
So why has China abandoned its special treatment at the WTO? But first, what is the WTO? Founded in 1995, the World Trade Body is an organization that aims to strengthen the rules of trade and commerce. It offers an arbitration mechanism for trade disputes between member states. But perhaps most importantly, WTO members benefit from reduced tariffs. Every member agrees to set a maximum tariff price on certain goods, known as bound tariffs. If the actual tariff applied is lower than the bound tariff, then every WTO member gets the same rate, unless a country has a preferential trade agreement with another member. So, how did China's accession to the World Trade Body come about?
It's a natural consequences of reform and opening up path taken in late 1970s after the Cultural Revolution. Deng Xiaoping decided with his friends and colleagues and party members to open China.
Beijing started negotiations to first join the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which preceded the WTO, before formally applying to join the Global Trade Body in 1995. And as surprising as it may seem today, the US was among the backers of China's WTO membership.
The US also saw that the Chinese accession could help China to push forward with its economic reform and maybe even political reform in China, right? So that China would further democratize, would join the US and other countries, as a sort of more liberal, more democratic countries, and therefore would become less of a threat to the US.
Although China already was the 8th largest world economy, it was still a fraction of what it is today. It represented 2.4% of the global GDP, compared to the US at 24.4% or Japan at 17.7%. When China formally joined the WTO in 2001, it was admitted under a special status as a developing country. The special status gives developing nations some leeway and privileges.
Over the years, Chinese government enjoyed longer transition periods, technical assistance, flexibility in agri-sector, safeguard provisions, recognition in dispute settlements. So definitely all those sort of 4 or 5 privileges were really taken by the Chinese government.
China's benefits were also different from those provided to other developing countries.
When China, applied to join the GATT and in the WTO, China was already a major trader. So that is very different from other developing countries. Most developing countries, as people would understand, are very poor. Therefore, they are not major exporters. So, for example, for the so-called aggregate measure of support, de minimis levels in the agreement on agriculture, normally as a developing country, you could claim the special benefit of 10% instead of 5%, which is available for developed countries. China sought 10%, but China didn't get 10%. Instead, China only got 8.5%. So that is higher than what was available for developed countries, but lower than what other developing countries get. So that is the situation that China faced when it joined the WTO, not 100% developing country treatment. China's developing country status didn't give it much of a benefit in the WTO. It was more of a symbolic value to China rather than providing any substantive benefits.
Still, Beijing's socialism with Chinese characteristics, together with its WTO membership, end up working in favor of its manufacturing and trading capabilities. China's steel industry, for example, benefited from heavy state subsidies. Chinese manufacturers were subsidized to provide steel to domestic construction companies, car, houseware, bottle cap manufacturers, and more. This led to China becoming the world's largest steel producer and subsequently biggest steel exporter. It was achieved at the expense of Western steel manufacturers, which had to compete with cheaper Chinese steel.
I mean, to be frank, this is largely because China has a different economic system than the US, right? China, as we all know, has a communist system which relies heavily on state planning, right, and state subsidies to promote the economy, unlike the US, which has basically laissez-faire capitalism, right, whereby the state does not traditionally intervene in the economy. So that explains the differences.
So in the span of 2 decades, China's GDP grew exponentially to become the world's second largest economy and the world's largest exporter. Beijing has championed and is a leader in several high-end industries, such as electric vehicles and renewable energy. That has sparked charges, especially from the US, of unfair competition and calls for Beijing to renounce its privileges.
The message was clear. The state capitalism of China changed its nature into the great technologies and competition with the West. I think that was a message that was clearly understood in the Western hemisphere. The government poured a lot of subsidies into robotics, EV, solar panel, semiconductors industry. So it was taken as a manifesto of confrontation with the West.
China is also a defendant in several trade disputes at the WTO. They're mostly related to state subsidies to Chinese companies, discrimination against foreign goods, forced technology transfers, and control over mineral supply chains like rare earth materials.
After President Trump came into office back in 2017, he started to criticize China's development country status by saying that China took advantage of the US, right? So the reason is very simple, because China is not the second largest economy in the world, right? So if you are the second largest economy, can you continue to claim the special and differential treatment, right?
But China's status as the world's second largest economy is not cut and dried. The country's GDP per capita remains far below that of developed countries. Wealth is also unevenly distributed. The level of development in some of its coastal provinces is on par with that of developed economies, while other provinces remain similar to other developing economies. So why is China renouncing its privileges? The trade war between Beijing and Washington, initiated by U.S. President Donald Trump during his first term, that later escalated to tariffs imposed on the rest of the world when he returned to office, has made China reconsider how it participates within the organization.
That is one main reason, because if you look at the so-called Liberation Day tariffs by the U.S., right, the tariffs were not really based on developed or developing country status, right? You see some developing countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, right, getting high tariffs, like as high as initially like close to 50%, right? And you see some rich countries, on the other hand, getting quite low tariffs, right? Just 10%, 15%. So because of the way the U.S. structure is tariffs, having development country status, it does not necessarily bring you benefits anymore.
While China has effectively stopped seeking developing nation privileges, it still claims to be a developing country at the WTO. In fact, Beijing is positioning itself as a leader of the developing world, the global South. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said many times that China will always be a developing country.
And from this perspective, I guess, this is purely a very political message. this political message is telling us a lot. China, of course, it should be perceived among developing countries as a responsible power. That's one thing. And the second thing is that the whole narratives about China's enjoying special privileges under the developing country status started from the Western governments are truly limited at the moment. So China gained twice here. The one thing is build its solid position among developing countries. On the other hand, limits the sort of harsh narratives from Western governments. So my point here is clear that if you just look into details of this decision, so China will not lose a lot, but gain more than lose.
There are still questions about whether China's WTO status change will lead to progress or new friction. But it certainly changes the way the game is played. And now China is no longer just playing, it's helping to rewrite the rules.